right. Greetings, everybody. Hope you can hear me and see me okay. Happy Monday. This weekend we sprang forward in the US, but man, I don't feel like I've been sprung at all. There's no spring in my step today. And I'm drinking here. This is reheated kind of dim sum tea. It's a mix of chrysanthemum and pu'er tea leaves. Picked this up from my wife, whose family, that's kind of what they order. It's sort of a dim sum that, they give you tea. I don't know if you've ever been to dim sum at a Chinese restaurant, they give you tea. And my wife's family, she being of Chinese extraction, they have they ask for a certain tea, which is this mix of chrysanthemum and pu'er, and it's quite good. And when I was trying to sort of quit the sugar in my tea, I realized that, I kind of like drinking the tea when we go to dim sum, and I don't feel the need to sugar it up. So maybe I should try to make it at home. And so I have, and I've done. Hey, Terrence. We're back with part 2 of the first edition AD&D, DMG, ASAP. I think I'm going to skip lycanthropy. I don't know. There's anything super. It's a whole bunch of texts. It's interesting stuff, right? But I don't know. I feel like we gotta draw the lines at certain places. Otherwise, I'll be here all year. I mean, I'll be here all year anyway. But I want to do other things besides the first edition DMG. But you get some tables for when you might change and. Wow. Oh, you gotta love the DMG. There's a damage table. I was looking at this. I'm like, what is going on here? Armor type, and then the different types of lycanthropes, and it's the damage you take. The damage a character takes from armor constriction before the snaps burst, and it falls off during a sudden change to lycanthrope form, which is amazing. So if you are a plate mail wearing son of a gun, and you suddenly change into a werebore or werebear, you're going to take between 2 and 5 hit points of damage. I guess it'd be what, 1d4 plus 1 would be about it, which is just one of those amazingly awesome. Where else are you going to find it? Where else are you going to find a table like that? Like the idea of bursting out of your armor is kind of cool. That Hulk sort of effect. But then we're going to take it up a notch. You're actually going to take damage from this, and we're going to give you the calculations that we're going to vary depending on which armor you're wearing. So the armor you do not want to wear is plate mail. Splint mail's only slightly better. I guess you really just want to be wearing no. Oh, I'm just booting off the visuals. Funny. Okay, so this might be interesting. We'll do alignments. I think alignments is always one of those subjects. People hate them. I don't know does anybody love alignments? I don't know. I've always appreciated alignments. I actually kind of like what they do. I think alignments get a bit of a bad rap. I mean, I understand why. People have had bad experiences with alignments, with GMs telling them, no, you can't do this because of your alignment. I like to think of it more in that behind the scenes, right? It gives you, when you're first creating your character, I think it does give you a kind of a platform. Okay, who are you? Who am I? I don't know who I am yet. This is a new character, but I'm lawful good. So that tells me some things about my own behavior, which gives me some cues to work off. And something comes up situation, and I don't know how my character would act. I go, oh, he's lawful good. Therefore, you probably would do A, B, or C, whatever it is. And then I do like as it goes on that maybe it becomes a reflection of your actions. So if you keep doing lawful good type stuff, then you'll stay lawful good. If you start doing neutral evil stuff, you'll kind of start to drift towards the neutrals and towards the evils. I don't like it when it's prohibitive and prescriptive. It's like, oh, I'm lawful good, so I cannot do these things. It's all about those choices you make. I also like the fact that these, at least originally, would tie in with magic items, magic swords and things would have alignment. And if you were a different alignment, it could literally kill you. You could just get zapped damage. I like that. I kind of thought alignment languages, yeah, they're funky, but they're kind of cool. That concept of you're on these teams and you can kind of recognize each other, excuse me, if you give the correct hand signals or words or gestures or weird noises of the cosmos. I'm not sure, but I like it. RPG Grandma says she likes them, useful for role-playing and politics in larger societies. Absolutely. but they can also be abused. They can be abused by players. They can be abused by GMs. And now we've gotten to this. Everyone's this kind of moral relativism. Well, if I think it's okay, then isn't it really okay, kind of thing. And I don't even think that really works. I mean, even in our world where everything is kind of gray because we don't have some deities coming out of the woodwork to. I mean, granted, everyone has their beliefs, but generally speaking, other than miracles and whatever else, everything kind of stays. The mortal realm stays in the mortal realm. But in a D&D type game where you literally have gods of good and evil who are active, I don't feel like that really works with this kind of moral. It doesn't matter if you believe your actions were good because you actually have an external deity who is telling you it's good or it's bad. But the argument's for another day. Well, let's see what Gygax has to say. This is obviously, I believe, the DMG came out in 1979, so a fair long time ago. And the alignments, had changed in the white box and also in, let's say, BX. Well, BX is later, but white box just had chaos, law, and neutrality. Then Holmes switched it up a little bit. I remember, and I think it was more of it might have been. I don't remember what they added in. And then we get to this one, which is the one that's probably most familiar to everybody from first edition on. Now, BX is, and I'm guessing Beck Me Too, though I don't remember checking. Recently, also were chaos, law, and neutrality, but everything kind of took from AD&D. So up until now, though they've been, I guess, kind of put on the back burner more and more, this is the kind of classic, what do they call it? Nine-pointed star alignment. So let's see what Gygax has to say about this. Alignment. Alignment describes the broad ethos of thinking, reasoning creatures, those unintelligent sorts being placed within the neutral area because they are totally uncaring. Note that alignment does not necessarily dictate religious persuasion, although many religious beliefs will dictate alignment. As explained under alignment languages, this aspect of alignment is not the major consideration. The overall behavior of the character or creature is delineated by alignment, or, in the case of player characters, behavior determines actual alignment. Well, so they're right there, right? Here's how Gygax is saying it should be used. Behavior determines alignment. Alignment does not determine behavior. That should probably get bandied about more when people bring that stuff up, but for some reason it doesn't. That's the other thing with the DMG. It is so dense that there's a lot of interesting takeaways and things that we may have had one belief, but at least Gygax is suggesting another one. But we don't. It's hard to find them. It's hard to. You have to. This is all. Look at this block of text here. This paragraph. Just got this massive block, kind of hard to sift through and find these little things, but it's interesting that right there he's laying it out. Behavior in terms of player characters, behavior determines actual alignment. Therefore, besides defining the general tendencies of creatures, it also groups creatures into mutually acceptable or at least non-hostile divisions. This is not to say that groups of similarly aligned creatures cannot be opposed or even mortal enemies. Two nations, for example, with rulers of lawful good alignment can be at war. Bands of orcs can hate each other. But the former would possibly cease their war to oppose a massive invasion of orcs, just as the latter would make common cause against the lawful good men. Thus, alignment describes the worldview of creatures and helps define what their actions, reactions, and purposes will be. It likewise causes a player character to choose an ethos which is appropriate to his or her profession, and alignment also aids players in the definition and role approach of their respective game personae, aka their characters. With the usefulness of alignment determined, definition of the divisions is necessary. So basically, it's like how I was saying, right? As a player, you're starting out, you might not know, you might not have a great idea how to act. Alignment sort of gives you this at least starting slate of choices that give you a description that you can sort of rest on until you've built up your character. RBG Grandma says, I am thinking of keeping the big three terms, but adding a morality bar and allowing players' behavior to track towards good or evil. Develop it, and the language part be law, chaos, or neutral. I like that stuff. I always like the kind of, I guess, high fantasy in the sense of Tolkien in those areas of sort of corruption, and you kind of go from a state of whatever you are, usually kind of good or neutral, and then you kind of go towards becoming just corrupted, and then not necessarily a pawn, but certainly, I guess, an instrument of Sauron, Morgoth style dark forces. So I'm down with the morality bar. I also like the idea of allowing players to create those create a code for your character. I think GURPS I think had that in there. I think we went through it on the GURPS quick start stream where you could pick it was one of the things you could pick to give yourself some extra points, and you have a code, and they had, the examples were like the pirates code, or you could have the kind of the mercenaries code, or a knight's code. I always thought those things were cool. The only issue with that is that either you have to be just kind of hoping your players interested enough in it to actually keep track of it and try to stick to their code, or you potentially have to track a bunch of these if you're trying to see how they're living up to their own ideals. And that just it's a lot. Whereas alignment, part of I think what makes it tricky is it is kind of all over the place, and there's lots of edge cases, and you can kind of you can try to say, oh, this was actually evil. No, this was actually good. And, whatever you can have, or this is chaotic. No, it's lawful, whatever, all that kind of stuff. But ideally, if you all have a natural you share a group understanding, those buckets are pretty easy to look at, easier with less work than trying to keep track of a bunch of individualized codes of honors. RPG Grandma says GURPS has cool ideas. Indeed, it does. So now the major alignment, the major divisions of alignment. There are two major divisions of four opposite points of view. All four are not mutually exclusive, although each pair is mutually opposed. Law and chaos. The opposition here is between organized groups and individuals. That is, law dictates that order and organization is necessary, desirable, while chaos holds the opposite view. Law generally supports the group as much more important than the individual, while chaos promotes the individual over the group. So there you have it, the old law and chaos thing, which a couple things here. So I guess one thing we can, and I didn't mention from the first paragraph we read, is in the white box up and BX sense, alignments are very abstract. They're really like these kind of cosmic teams that you sign up to play for. And other than those teams determining who is friendly to you if they know your alignment versus who's unfriendly to you, there's no bearing on your behavior. There is no behavioral element to them at all. If you were a character of law, it doesn't really mean, in terms of the rules as they are presented, that you have to be good or even be lawful in any way or whatever you want. That they don't even really, I don't think they even define, if I'm recalling, they don't even define what they are. There's no concept of law means this, chaos means that. It's kind of like you pick a team and they show you, in the white box, there was a little chart that kind of showed where different creatures fell, and humanoids and a lot of those types fall across all three. Some creatures were only in one, that kind of thing. Now we have this behavioral element. So now we have defined what, in terms of this kind of behavioral approach, law and chaos mean. Law is about sort of groups, and chaos is all about individuals. So now we get on to good and evil. Basically stated, the tenets of good are human rights, or in the case of AD&D, creature rights. Each creature is entitled to life, relative freedom, and the prospect of happiness. Cruelty and suffering are undesirable. Evil, on the other hand, does not concern itself with rights or happiness. Purpose is the determinant. So there we go. So we have some other good terms. You're supposed to live and let live, and that sort of thing is good. And if you don't care about that stuff, you generally are evil. And I think the interesting thing here is this kind of definition. Evil does not concern itself with rights or happiness. Purpose is the determinant. I think a lot of folks would see that more as sort of the neutral part, which is interesting, right? Because you get in those arguments of the true neutral person just goes around doing whatever the heck they want. This, to me, if I was to read this, and I'm going with this reading, I would say that true neutral type of person, at least that kind of true neutral, doesn't exist here because they're evil. Purpose is the determinant. And that, to me, or I guess it was the chaotic neutral. Chaotic neutral, I do whatever I want when I want to do it. Well, that just means that you're doing whatever you feel like your purpose is. In that moment, you're evil. You're not actually chaotic neutral, whatever that is. I always hated chaotic neutral as just being just for lazy folks who just don't want to be bothered with, picking a side or picking some rules or limitations to their behavior. But here it seems to say that if your whole thing is doing whatever you want and not concerning yourself with what it means for anybody else, you're just evil. That ain't neutral, pal. That's evil. Derek says, don't some classes require certain alignment behaviors, else you may lose your class? Yes, famously paladins, for sure. There are probably other ones too. I don't know if clerics, if there's anything with that. I mean, there's always the concept that if you are, you have to keep covenant with whichever god that you're attached to, and that you could lose your powers that way. But probably paladins would be the ones that come to mind as having you must be this alignment and kind of stick to that. There can never exist a lawful chaos or an evil good. These and their reverses are dichotomous. This is not to say that they cannot exist in the same character or creature if it is insane or controlled by another entity, but as general divisions, they are mutually exclusive pairs. Consider also the alignment graph. If law is opposed to chaos and good to evil, then the radically opposed alignments are lawful, neutral. Chaotic, neutral, neutral, good, neutral, evil, lawful, good, chaotic, evil, and lawful, evil. Chaotic. Oh, wait, sorry. Let me do that again. If law is opposed to chaos and good to evil, then the radically opposed elements are lawful neutral to chaotic neutral, neutral good to neutral evil, lawful good to chaotic evil, and lawful evil to chaotic good. Lawful groups might, for example, combine to put down some chaotic threat, for example, just as readily as good groups would combine to suppress some powerful evil. Basic understanding and agreement, however, is within the general specific alignment, i.e. one of the 9 categories. These are defined as follows. So now we're going to get more into the weeds here. Neutrality. Absolute or true neutral creatures view everything which exists as integral, necessary part or function of the entire cosmos. Each thing exists as part of the whole, one as a check or balance to the other, with life necessary for death, happiness for suffering, good for evil, order for chaos, and vice versa. Nothing must ever become predominant or out of balance. Within this neutralistic ethos, mankind or humankind serves a role also, just as all other creatures do. They may be more or less important, but the neutral does not concern himself or herself with these considerations, except where it is positively determined that the balance is threatened. Absolute neutrality is in the center of or fulcrum position, quite logically, as the neutral sees all other alignments as parts of a necessary whole. This alignment is the narrowest in scope. Well, there you have it, pal. You want to be a true neutral. You don't have the most latitude, you have the least latitude, because to you, everything is integral, everything is important, everything is worth having. So if you're going to make a decision to do something, if you're in that true neutral, it's super important and that you essentially choose wisely, because anything else might be upsetting the balance. If you're trying to keep the balance, a lot of times the main thing might be do nothing. So if you thought that neutrality was I just do what I want when I want, wrong answer, pal. Okay, neutral good. Creatures of this alignment see the cosmos as a place where law and chaos are merely tools to bringing in life, happiness, and prosperity to all deserving creatures. Order is not good unless it brings this to all. Neither is randomness and total freedom desirable if it does not bring such good. All right, so here's the still kind of balance idea, but balance tilted towards bringing goodness. The things that are good. Whoops. Oh, what did I do? What did I do? No, hold on a minute. Sorry. There we go. Let's see. Okay, that was neutral good. Neutral evil. Similar to the neutral good alignment, that of neutral evil holds that neither groups nor individuals have great meaning. This ethos holds that seeking to promote weal for all actuality brings woe to the truly deserving. Natural forces which are meant to cull out the weak and stupid are artificially suppressed by so-called good, and the fittest are wrongfully held back. So whatever means are expedient can be used by the powerful to gain and maintain their dominance without concern for anything. Sounds like kind of a social Darwinist sort of ethos there. Lawful good. Creatures of lawful good alignment view the cosmos with varying degrees of lawfulness or desire for good. They are convinced that order and law are absolutely necessary to assure good, and that good is best defined as whatever brings the most benefit to the greater number of decent thinking creatures and the least woe to the rest. Lawful neutral. It is the view of this alignment that law and order give purpose and meaning to everything. Without regimentation and strict definition, there would be no purpose in the cosmos. Therefore, whether a law is good or evil is of no import as long as it brings order and meaning. So interesting, because you can see a lot of lawful neutral folks following somebody who's lawful evil, presuming that any law is, as long as it brings order and meaning, is good, which is interesting. Interesting idea. Seems like a lot of bureaucrats would probably fall into the lawful neutral zone. Lawful evil. Obviously, all order is not good, nor are all laws beneficial. Lawful evil creatures consider order as the means by which each group is properly placed in the cosmos, from lowest to highest, strongest first, weakest last. Good is seen as an excuse to promote the mediocrity of the whole and suppress the better and more capable, while lawful evilness allows each group to structure itself and fix its place as compared to others, serving the stronger but being served by the weaker. And finally, chaotic good. To the chaotic good individual, freedom and independence are as important to life and happiness. The ethos views this freedom as the only means by which each creature can achieve true satisfaction and happiness. Law, order, social forms, and anything else which tends to restrict or abridge individual freedom is wrong, and each individual is capable of achieving self-realization and prosperity through himself, herself, or itself. So it's pretty interesting because I think this would be a bit different than maybe some folks would see chaotic good. The classic chaotic good examples tend to be, Batman or say Robin Hood. But I think actually, I maybe Batman would fit this conception of chaotic good, though maybe it would depend on which iteration of Batman. I'm not sure, right? Because I don't know if Batman suggests that the idea of Batman is that the freedom is the only means by which each creature can achieve true satisfaction and happiness. Because I think what most people take chaotic good is we want to do good, and regardless of the law, which Batman being a vigilante type or any kind of vigilante type character would sort of fit that, right? The laws aren't going to hold me back from doing good, but that's not quite what this version of chaotic good is saying. It's saying that, hey, freedom, independence is what you want. Not I'm going to circumvent some laws, but that we don't need laws. What we need is laws aren't really important at all, right? And I don't know that that's what, say, Batman thinks. And then as far as Robin Hood goes, I feel like the way reading these, Robin Hood really fits. I think at least the film conceptions. I'm thinking primarily of the sort of classic ones. I guess the Kevin Costner one would probably fit, but really more Errol Flynn Robin Hood. Because if you think about what Robin Hood wants, Robin Hood is essentially a character who is not opposed to the law. He's not somebody who feels like laws aren't there, or in their case, kind of a feudal system. It's wrong. I mean, he was a lord. His lordship was removed. He's not out here trying to say that, hey, the feudal system is bad, we should get rid of it. He's out there fighting someone, say Prince John, who would be a creature of lawful evil, who has come in and essentially perverted the laws for own gain, as someone who's lawful evil should do. And Robin Hood just wants the real king to come back, which is a very lawful kind of thing, right? Order will be restored when the rightful authority arrives. The whole question of where is King Richard? King Richard was, and then the whole subplot of, King Richard was, he was captured prisoner he was on crusade. Then he was taken prisoner. And now he's somewhere in the countryside. We don't know. And suddenly he pops up, and Robin Hood would like nothing more than to have him brought in as the rightful king and bend the knee and go about his business. Robin Hood's deal is not get rid of feudalism, just like I don't think Batman's deal is we don't need Commissioner Gordon and the cops. So it's kind of interesting to look at these under these definitions, because I think when you look online, and I mean not even online, just when people are reading all about it, they get those kinds of examples of those sorts of heroes. We have a couple more alignments left, but that's maybe not as accurate. Derek says, I am the law. Yeah, and Brian Smith, hey Brian, says that Robin Hood is the OG Batman, pretty much. Though maybe, I don't know if Batman's trying to install the rightful authority. He's just there because the law isn't. It's kind of interesting because I think Batman probably sees himself, and correct me if I'm wrong, I know just movies and stuff, Batman. I've never read the comics much of Batman, but more that law is not enough. We need an addendum, and I will be that. I will fill in to do things that the law cannot do. Not we need to kind of overturn, or that law isn't important. So those are just interesting to think about when if you have alignments in your game, you're thinking about it. Not to say that other interpretations, because this is just Gygax's version, and you can come up with your own that's just as valid. I mean, whatever you want to come up with is valid for your table, but it might be interesting to come back and look at these next time you're going through characters or going through kind of thinking about alignments, because maybe there's a little bit different than we might remember. Yes, Ian, it does lack nuance, but I think part of that's by design. I feel like it's easy to say. I think it's easy to bash the alignment as it lacks nuance, which it surely does. They're making these big buckets, but someone show me a really nuanced system, because I think the alternative is just that, well, there's no system and everything you do is okay if you say it's okay, which is, I don't know. I'm willing to give up some nuance for a workable system. I'm certainly not against alignment. I would love, maybe it'll have to be me. Maybe it'll be one of you will come up with a system that can bring some of the positives, at least that I think of alignment, into a package that maybe is more palatable and more apt to be used and not abused. Is it possible? I think it is, but maybe no one's done it yet. RBG Grandma says chaotic good equals old school hippie. Yeah, I think that might that might be right. Like we can all live in communes and we don't need the law. Chaotic neutral says that this view of the cosmos holds, or rather that the chaotic neutral view of the cosmos holds that absolute freedom is necessary. Whether the individual exercising such freedom chooses to do good or evil is of no concern. After all, life itself is law and order, so death is a desirable end. Therefore, life can only be justified as a tool by which order is combated. And in the end, it too will pass into entropy. So basically, if you're chaotic neutral, you should be fighting to literally fight. You were there to fight for your right to die, I guess. And then chaotic evil, the chaotic evil creature holds that individual freedom and choice is important, and that other individuals and their freedoms are unimportant if they cannot be held by the individuals through their own strength and merit. Thus, law and order tend to promote not individuals but groups, and groups suppress individual volition and success. Derek says, it seems like AD&D alignment intends to open up deeper philosophical discussions at the table. I mean, I don't know if he really means to open up for discussions. I think there is a lot of fruit there. I think what they're trying to do is give you a way to really sort of flesh out your character in a very neat sort of mechanical or pseudo. I don't know. There's not really that much mechanics around alignment. Maybe a little bit of mechanics and to way to think of it, and provide you a template. I think the way they're written is interesting, and they do give a lot of discussion. Whether they really and I think whether it was intended to promote discussion or not, I mean, alignments have been talked about nonstop since at least this version, since they emerged. So it certainly has been a fruitful topic. It'd be interesting to go back and wonder, like, they had the plane, like, maybe it's in one of the books. It's been a while since I read through Reading at the World. I don't remember. It would be interesting to come up to the genesis of why did you choose to go from the very abstract sort of cosmic teams, to the behavioral approach. I wonder if other games were doing behavioral things and they kind of wanted in. Was it something they wanted to change, again, as part of that move to get away from the sort of more Arnesonian stuff, to try to pull it away from there for various reasons? Or what was it? Because this was a fairly big change, at least from the white box version. And Holmes, I don't have in front of me. Well, actually, I do have in front of me, because it's right here. Hold on a second. Oh, wait. No, I don't have the Holmes book. Nope, the Holmes book isn't here. Just the reference sheet. Wah, wah. No, I thought I had it here, but I don't. So I don't know what Mr. Holmes would say. So let's see. So we got some more here. I'll read this other paragraph, and then we can kind of, I don't know if we want to deal with the alignment language. I suppose I'll read it because it's another one of those interesting tidbits of the ancient past. Each of these cases for alignment is, of course, stated rather simplistically and ideally, for philosophical and moral reasonings are completely subjective according to the acculturation of the individual. You, as Dungeon Master, must establish the meanings and boundaries of law and order as opposed to chaos and anarchy, as well as the divisions between right and good as opposed to hurtful and evil. Lawful societies will tend to be highly structured, rigid, well-policed, and bureaucratic hierarchies, I think is what they meant. Class, rank, position, and precedence will all be important, so they will be strictly defined and adhered to. On the other hand, chaotic areas will have little government and few social distinctions. The governed will give their consent to government, acknowledging leaders as equals, serving those who allowed them to assume leadership. Obedience and service in a chaotic society is given only by those desiring to do so, or by dint of some persuasion, never by requirement. So basically, like we were saying already, right? Come up with a set that works for your table. This is kind of guidelines to help you on your way, but of course, find what works for you. And I think the thing is that's also kind of forgotten there is this element. If you do not want chaotic neutrals in your game, you can define them in such a way to make them essentially unplayable, or you could just take it off the table. And no chaotic neutral. You can't do it. You do not have to allow it because it's in the book. And it is for you to define what separates good, evil, neutral, law, chaos, all that stuff. Alignment with respect to the planes. I'll skip over that. I'm not that interested. We'll do the alignment language bit, or at least part of it. Alignment language. Alignment language is a handy game tool which is not unjustifiable in real terms. Thieves did employ a special cant. Secret organizations and societies did and do have certain recognition signs, signals, and recognition phrases, possibly special languages of limited extent as well. Consider also the medieval Catholic Church, which used Latin as a common recognition and communication base to cut across national boundaries. In AD&D, alignment language are the special set of signs, signals, gestures, and words which intelligent creatures use to inform other intelligent creatures of the same alignment of their fellowship and common ethos. Alignment languages are never flaunted in public. They are not used as salutations or interrogatives if the speaker is uncertain of the alignment of those addressed. Furthermore, alignment languages are of limited vocabulary and deal with the ethos of the alignment in general. So lengthy discussion of varying subjects cannot be conducted in such tongues. So this is essentially changing a little bit with alignment language. Alignment languages in the white box, there's not much said about it other than they exist. And it was interesting because the suggestion was, well, it's not even a suggestion in the books to say if you were in some crowded place and you heard, or I guess at least as far as, I don't know, they don't mandate player behavior, but if you as a player spoke the alignment language of law in, say, a busy tavern, and some creature was in there who was of the chaos, that they would just attack you on sight. Like it was on like Donkey Kong, like almost like it was some kind of sacred primordial language that would either be recognized positively or extremely negatively. But it was interesting because what I like about it in terms of the game is it gives you kind of a last ditch method of communication. If all else fails, you could try an alignment language, and it's a tough gambit. There's something there and you've been trying to communicate with it, or you're certain that it doesn't understand any language you have. You can try to eyeball it, and maybe you've got somebody of chaos and law, two people in your party. You can go, well, one of us could try to talk to it in the alignment language, knowing that if it works, hopefully that'll be a good thing. But if it fails, we're attacking. That's it. It's on. And I like that. I thought that was kind of neat. It's like it's leaving open this little back door of, hey, you always have this one last gasp try to work things out, communicating. Everything else may be impossible. You could try to communicate, but there's high stakes. If this is something that you're sure if you fail, it will kind of kill you, or it's really tough, it's dicey. If you pick wrong, it's on. What they've done is turn it into something that makes more sense from a practical standpoint. Again, look at their examples they use. Okay, thieves can't, say that a Freemason handshakes, things like that. The scope has now been way dialed down. You're not, this is something that you never flaunt this in public. Or at least, I suppose you still could, but the nature of it makes it hard to do anyway. You can't really flaunt a Masonic handshake in public because you need to actually shake somebody's hand. You can't just make all kinds of funky hand signals. Doesn't work. It's a handshake kind of thing. And then you're not supposed to, here they're saying, don't use this just to try to figure out on the off chance this person shares your alignment to try to make a connection. It's for somebody who is already of your alignment. And on top of it, very limited vocabulary that's generally going to be about alignment kind of issues. So it really dialed it down. Now, I think this probably was done in response to just the way the game is, the way people were thinking about alignment language and kind of thinking, well, isn't it goofy? Doesn't make sense, blah, blah, blah. So, okay, we're going to turn it into this thing that's going to make more sense. But in many ways, the power of it is way, way diminished. Now it's more, it seems like something that if you're all of, say, good alignment, and you're in a situation when you're surrounded by evil people, let's say you've been captured by evil creatures and you're in a holding cell, or you're in a cage, you're being dragged back to a lair, you might be able to talk to each other a little bit and they can't understand you because you're using your alignment language. So not that that's not useful, but given the fact that as a GM, you would be rightfully able to limit what you could say in those things, because you're going to have to try to pick and choose what you could say about it. It's not going to be, you can't just talk, say, naturally, because the words aren't there to express it because of the limited vocabulary. Even in that case, it's maybe not quite as useful. So it's a change. I kind of like the old school one, even though maybe it's a little bit odd and goofy. But I think that you can just see how the game's evolving, the audience is evolving, and as people saw, people have been questions about alignment language, like, does that make any sense, or why would it ever be? And so here's this kind of attempt to keep it, but try to turn it into something that maybe more people find sensical. Terrence says, it's okay. It's okay, guys. I speak chaotic. Yeah, could be. Could be. Brian Smith says, I like them as gestures. Easier to come up with one maybe that you could use as a DM or recognize as a player. It's just always been hard for me to actually include thieves can't, other than they speak in thieves can't and can just talk normal to the character who knows it. Yeah, I wouldn't try to express it in the fiction, like playing. I wouldn't say to my players, like, okay, speak, come up with it. I mean, I liked it when it's just a full-fledged language and let them have it. The thing is that I like that danger element. To me, the danger element outweighs, is a really interesting sort of limiter, and not only just to limit it, because obviously if something's going to attack you if they hear it, then in my earlier example of being captured by evil creatures, you don't want to speak the alignment language, or say of chaos creatures. You don't want to speak the alignment language of law, because they'll just lose their sugar and attack you, and you're not going to be in a spot to do much about it. So that would be just bad. But at the same time, you could try to make a play. If you're using in this kind of thieves camp mode, the only things I could see doing is come up with a list of words that and then say, okay, you can only speak using these words using the thieves can't, or whatever can't, something like that. I wouldn't have them actually try to learn symbols, something like that. And I also don't mind if you just want to say, okay, you can just talk normally, it's just in thieves can't. That's fine too. And there's plenty of fictional, I feel like, literary examples of characters having whole conversations and some kind of signs are only things that they share, which is fine with me. All right, I don't think let's see. I feel like that's enough of that. Oh wait, here we go. Actually, we do have so much. So let's see what else they say, because I must admit to being interested. Each alignment language is constructed to allow recognition of like-aligned creatures and to discuss the precepts of the alignment in detail. Otherwise, the tongue will permit only the most rudimentary communication with a vocabulary limited to a few score words. The speaker could inquire of the listener's state of health, ask about hunger, thirst, or degree of tiredness. A few other basic conditions and opinions could be expressed, but no more. So at least we have an example of, okay, so we were wondering, well, what can you talk about in these alignment languages? There you go. Health, hunger, health, essentially hunger, tiredness. You're basically, are you okay? Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Are you sleepy? And maybe a few other conditions and things like that. So if you could keep it to those, you could just use that as a guide. All right, you're in this alignment language, you're limited to talking about these sorts of things. The specialty tongues of Druidic and the Thieves' Cant are designed to handle conversations pertaining to things Druidical on the one hand, and thievery, robbery, and the disposal of stolen goods on the other. Druids could discuss at length and in detail the state of the crops, weather, animal husbandry, and foresting, but warfare, politics, adventuring, and like matter would be impossible to detail with such language, or with the language. Whoops, I did it again. Hold on a minute, sorry about that. I keep doing that, accidentally bumping my spot. Any character foolish enough to announce his or her alignment by publicly crying out in that alignment tongue will incur considerable social sanctions. At best, he or she will be thought unmannerly, rude, boorish, and stupid. Those of the same alignment will be inclined to totally ignore the character, not wishing to embarrass themselves by admitting any familiarity with the offender. Those of other alignment will likely regard the speaker with distaste when overhearing such an outburst. At worst, the character will be marked by those hostile to the alignment in which he or she spoke. So it goes from being essentially a fight to combat to it's a faux pas. Maybe not a faux pas without consequence, but this is just head shaking and just tisking, right? So they've lowered the stakes quite a bit. Alignment language is used to establish credentials only after initial communications have been established by other means. Only in the most desperate of situations would any creature utter something in the alignment tongue otherwise. It must also be noted that alignment does not necessarily empower a creature to actually speak or understand the alignment language, which is general in the ethos. Thus, blink dogs are intelligent, lawful good creatures who have a language of their own. A lawful good human, dwarf, or brownie will be absolutely at a loss to communicate with blink dogs, however, except in the most limited of ways, non-aggression, non-fear, etc., without knowledge of the creature's language or some magical means. This is because blink dogs do not intellectually embrace the ethos of lawful good, but are of that alignment instinctually. Therefore, they do not speak the tongue used by lawful good. This is not true of gold dragons, let us say, or red dragons with respect to their alignment, who do speak their respective alignment languages. I mean, that seems to be getting a bit picky there. So you can't make friends with the blink dogs using it because it's just instinctual, even though they're intelligent. Okay, I would probably just give it an all or nothing. Just say, hey, you got to have intelligence, and then if there's a few outliers like blink dogs that maybe can speak alignment language, I'd be cool with blink dogs speaking alignment language. I'm not sure why that separation seems a bit with many things, right? Some of the things just I feel like just don't add enough value to worry about it. So there's how many of these different monsters are there, creatures like blink dogs that you would say are intelligent but instinctually rather than intellectually lawful good, and therefore don't know the language? Like, how many are there? Like, who blink dogs? I'm sure there's probably some other ones you could argue. I don't know. I feel like if they know language, if they're intelligent enough to speak language, they could speak the alignment language. So why this distinction? How many times is even given everything they've said about how they envision alignment language to be used only after you've made contact, only in this case, only in that case, only with this? Like, really, at the end of the day, how many times are you running into blink dog creatures or something where you're like, nope, even after all that, still not going to work? It's like, come on, literally and figuratively, throw them a bone. Here's something. So I'm not going to read through all. Let's see. We got some more about alignment or changing alignments. That's fine. I'm not going to say read about money, but I do want to read the paragraph on player character expenses because this is something that comes up, and I'm curious to see what Gygax has to say about it. Player character expenses. Each player character will automatically expend not less than 100 gold pieces per level of experience per month. This is simply support, upkeep, equipment, and entertainment expense. These costs are to be deducted by the Dungeon Master automatically, and any further spending by the PCs to be added to these costs. Such expense is justified by the quote-unquote fact that adventurers are freewheeling and high-living lot, except, of course, for monks. Other miscellaneous expenditures by player characters encompass such things as additional equipment expense for henchmen or hirelings, cost of hirelings, bribes, costs of locating prospective henchmen, and so on. So such costs are to be added. And then we've got, okay, you have to spend at minimum 100 gold pieces per level of experience per month. So the higher you go, the more money you need. Now, this is one of those things that's going to come across as not particularly friendly to, I think, the concepts of play we have now, which is essentially it doesn't matter the choices you're making. You're 5th level, 500 gold pieces a month, hand it over. There's no choice there, right? If you're saying to yourself, but I'm not doing anything. I'm living as a hermit in a cave in the hills. Like, what does that have to do with me being 5th level? Like, it doesn't matter. It's just that is the choice. And I think that now we probably would look at doing it a different way. Now there are some justifications there, right? Okay. Well, I mean, some of it wheeling and high living. What if the player says, I'm making a choice to no freewheeling for me. I'm going to be living low. Does that make a difference? No. Now, some of the things I think you could say, well, listen, you still have to upkeep your armor. You still have to pay, all that stuff you need to do, all that stuff that we're not dealing with in the rules, right? We're not, when you come back to town, we don't have a session where you're repolishing your armor and fixing where joints have broken and replacing leather straps and all the kind of maintenance things, or sharpening in your blades and refixing refining the edges and doing all that kind of stuff and oiling everything, right? We're not dealing with that in game, so it's all getting put into this upkeep. So that part we could say, like, you can't do without that stuff. And why would you want to do without that stuff? And instead of giving some kind of a la carte menu where you'd pick out the stuff, we're going to say there's just a general upkeep for you that you have to do. But then some of it, is kind of on this, like, well, wait a minute, I don't want to be high living and freewheeling. It doesn't matter. You're putting your money in anyway. Brian Smith calls it the maintenance montage. Exactly. Maintenance, training, all that stuff. So we get some, this is an addition. We have to do maintenance of henchmen, which is 100 gold pieces per level per month. maintenance of the stronghold, 1% of the total cost of the stronghold per month. That one is you could probably justify these two. And that's so the maintenance of henchmen is in addition to all their treasure shares. Now the henchmen is that because I think most times henchmen as opposed to retainers are just level 0. I think, right? They're just mercenary soldiers. They don't have really class levels. So I guess is that still in per level of the character? So I guess you get, I think we'd probably do this as RBG Grandma says, yeah, we probably do this. We might handle this differently now. Yes. It's interesting to think about how you might do this. So let me read the rest of it, and then we can look at some of these because I think it's an interesting topic, and it's one that certainly comes up in what do we do if our players are getting loot, they're doing all these things, they're ending up with these big piles. What do we do? Well, here's something you're supposed to kind of be doing, but it might be a little bit off-putting to some players who are going to feel just kind of railroaded into handing over money. Now, there's always the, well, you got to hand over a certain amount to the Lord, and to the whoever runs the land, right? Whoever is the local authority is going to ask for a cut. That would be one way you could say, all right, you're going to have to shave that off for them. And maybe that's how you think about it rather than the freewheeling and high living, because you can't opt out of paying to your superiors. Unless you're going to make your stronghold out in the wilderness, you're going to have to be paying to somebody. Probably even then, you're going to have to swear fealty to someone. You got to pay them their cut. So that might be the better way to look at it. But the last two paragraphs in this subsection read, finally, any taxation or other levies must be taken into consideration, along with contributions to the player character's religious organization. All of these costs will help assure the PCs have a keen interest in going out and adventuring in order to support themselves and their many associates and holdings. You may reduce costs according to prevailing circumstances if you feel it is warranted, but even so doing should not give rise to excess funds on hand in the campaign. So the idea here is laying out to you is, hey, look, you got to keep them in a state of scarcity because that's going to send them out adventuring. If you don't have that, they end up having too much money. It can cause issues, as people have seen. Now, we would probably want to deal a little bit differently. Now, keep in mind, and he's saying that, hey, on top of the 100 gold pieces per level per month, taxations on top of that, any kind of other levying. I do like the idea of contributing to religious organizations, especially if you're in a game where your party is taking folks back to the local priest to get raised and things like that. You can tie that into, hey, you got to be monthly. You got to be tithing in. You got to be tithing in every month. And so you want in on those services that the church provides, this temple provides. You need to ante up on a monthly. That's how you're going to get in. It'll be interesting to kind of try to refactor a little bit. I like the idea of, so one of the things I've seen and I've enjoyed is that you have those levels of living. You want to live like a hobo, you can go on the cheap. You want to live sort of at a certain level, and then maybe if you want to live sort of luxuriously. And how you can make those meaningful is that no one's going to take you seriously if you're living like a hobo. You want to live like a hobo on the cheap? Fine. But you know what people are going to treat you? They're going to treat you like a hobo because that's who you are. You're not getting a meeting with the local lord because they're going to know you're living rough on the street. You're not getting in anywhere. No one's letting you in. No one's giving you the time of day because you're not presenting yourself as a person who's important. If you want to present yourself as a person who's important, you're going to have to, be pretty much on the luxury level. If you think about, I always loved in the film adaptation of, what was it? The Count of Monte Cristo. In the film adaptation of The Count of Monte Cristo, this is the one that's 15 or 20 years old. And I read the story back in I think high school or junior high school, so my memories of the actual text are very blurry. But the count, he was wrongfully imprisoned, and he's able to get out of the prison with a treasure map, and then he gets all his treasure, and now he's going to get vengeance on all the folks who put him away. So what he does, and I love it in the movie, is he plans this whole huge gala bash party. And he's teased because he's got just, I think, who knows how much, I don't know if they ever say, I don't think in the movie they ever say, and maybe in the book they don't even say how much wealth this person now has, but it's unending, essentially. Huge, just gala. And then he comes down in this balloon, like this Prince of Darkness. He's all wearing like dark, this purples. He's got this goatee and stuff, and he just looks like this just evil, sort of just super being, right? But of course, all these greedy corrupt folks are just drawn to him like flies to a flame. It just moths. They all want to cozy up to him. And of course, that's exactly what he wants, because that's going to be the key to getting them. But they take him super seriously because he presents himself as someone who is super serious. First of all, that money is important. If you want if your characters want to be important, or they want to be seen as important, they have to pony up to be seen as important. If they decide they want to just live on the docks and sleep in piles of refuse and wear clothes that are rotting off their backs and not spend any money, great. But no one's giving you the time of day. They're gonna send you off, and they just want to dump water on you, just throw you in the river to wash you off and send you downwind from them. So you can play with that if you want to get folks into the thinking about how you can justify these kinds of expenditures. Gygax uses the kind of heavy hand of, well, you got to pay it because I'm saying you got to pay it. Think about giving them some choices, but those choices have consequences. You want to take you want to cheap out, fine, but you're going to be treated as such. That's how they're going to see you. Or you can spend some dough and be seen like a prince or a king. RPG Grandma mentions entrance and exit fees to cities. Yep, that's also a good one. Let's see. Brian Smith says, I'd rather not think about all this granularly. Conan never sorted out 1% of the total cost of the fortress, yada, yada. Well, I don't know. Did Conan ever have a fortress? I mean, I know before he came king of, he accepted his crown and was king of Valeria or whatever. I don't think he had a fortress, so he didn't have to do it. At least the 1% of total cost, you only kind of have to figure that out. I don't think you have to figure out that number very often, right? So the benefit of that is you could have it. And look, nowadays, I mean, here's the thing. Imagine doing this in 79 when your everything is on graph paper and you're using a calculator and you have literally might have a ledger. Now, even if you want to be detailed, you've got an Excel spreadsheet that's spitting out that 1% for you, or Google Sheets, or name your online spreadsheet per month. So it's actually much easier and less onerous to do this math work now than it used to be. But yeah, I get your point. But at least that one, you're not, unless they're constantly working on their stronghold, it's not going to factor in that much. You'll have a number and it'll stick to that number for quite a while. RBG Grandma says the Guild of Outland Tax Services, making sure no citizen of any kingdom in the multiverse doesn't avoid their taxes. Exactly. Brian Smith, your first year of college was sleeping on docks and refuse with clothes falling off? Wasn't quite that bad. All right. Let me see if there's anything. So we only have a few minutes left to the hour. I'm not super into that. We got stuff about gems and the values of things. That's fine. If you needed some stones, you've got your stones. We've got monies, gemstones, jewelry. Oh, this is kind of nice. Reputed magic properties of gems. You could play with this. Carbuncle. So if you needed here, if you wanted to create some, this one, look at this. If you're interested in stuff, this reputed magical properties of gems table, again, it's these kind of just weird, super granular detail things you get in the DMG, but that are awesome. If you're looking for either you were creating magic items and you needed gems or semi-precious gems, whatever to use in them, then this is a great list. If you're doing something that gave you Dragon Sight, then Carbuncle is your gem, sort of thing. Or if you wanted to indicate something about something, Chrysoprase gives off invisibility. So maybe you find in your ye old mystery scene, something's happened, whatever. But you find shards of Chrysoprase. Maybe somebody casts an invisibility spell. Ooh, what? Invisible assailant? That might be a clue, boss. Something like that. So you'll get all kinds of stones and fancy stones. I'm not going to read through it, but it's good stuff. And you got more over here. Values of other rare commodities such as beaver pelts, sable pelts, armor class and weapons. I don't think we need to go. Do we need to go over armor class and weapons? Types of armor and encumbrance. So here's getting back into some of the granular stuff that maybe is not all that, just practically speaking, knowing that, banded mail is bulky bulk and chainmail is fairly bulk and elfin chain is non-bulky. It's just okay. I don't know where that's going to come in. I suppose If I really needed to know that systematically, I guess we've got it. But do I really? Do I really need it? Probably not. All right, so here's hirelings. I definitely want to read about hirelings because I love me some hirelings. Standard hirelings. Most hirelings are dealt with under the section entitled Expert Hirelings, those which are typically employed at such time as the character in question has an established stronghold. Common standard hirelings are basically the usual craftsmen and laborers taken on by lower level characters. Men at arms, soldiers, or mercenary calling are dealt with under expert hirelings. Typical standard hirelings are, and we have bearers / porters, carpenters, leather workers, limners, link boys, masons, pack handlers, tailors, teamsters, and valet / lackey. Love it. All right, and then you get their daily cost, their monthly cost. The monthly rate assumes that quarters are provided for the hireling and that these quarters contain a bed and like necessities. So if you're giving him a room but no bed, doesn't count. Brian Smith says buys all his pants in the fairly bulk sizes. Yep, I agree. Nice and loose. And then their additional cost is 10% of the normal price of items fashioned by the hireling. Okay. I guess. What is that star for? Oh, tailors. I see. Okay. So then we get some definitions. Limners, they do sign painting, if you were curious. Link boys are torch bearers, masons, all that stuff. Location of standard hirelings. Oh, wait, what about valets and lackeys? This occupation subsumes the various forms of body servants and messengers. All right, good enough. Location of standard hirelings. In general, the various occupations represented here are common to most settlements of village size and above, although each and every village will not be likely to furnish each and every sort of common hireling. Towns and cities will have many available, and each sort will be found in the appropriate section or quarter of the city or town. So there you go. Employment of standard hirelings. This requires the location of the desired individual and the offer of work. If the employment is for only a few days, there will be no real difficulty in locating individuals to take on the job. If the offer is for long-term employment, only 1 in 6 will be willing to accept unless a small bonus is offered. A day's wage is too small, but double or treble that is sufficient to make 3 in 6 willing to take service. So that's interesting. It's harder to obtain folks for long-term. Folks just want to work. The gig economy is strong, I guess. They just want to work for a couple a day or two. But if you want them to put them on permanent, you're going to have to sweeten the pot. Brian Smith says there's so many varieties of hirelings. Love it. Got to collect them all. Pretty much. Duties. It is not practical to try to determine the time and expenses necessary to accomplish everything possible for the scores of standard hirelings possible to employ. So each DM will have to decide. For example, assume that a player character hires a tailor to make plain blue cloaks for all his or her henchmen. This will take only about 1 day per garment, and the cost, the stated amount of money, plus 5 copper, 10% of the cost of a cloak, per cloak for materials. However, if the same cloaks would be fashioned of a material of unusual color and have some device also sewed upon them, time and material costs would be at least double standard and probably more. Surprisingly, we don't get a table with that, because that's where I feel like now in the modern OSR, there would be some table with the rising complexity of different cloaks or different items and what that would mean to the cost of the item. But here you just, probably you could just make a base ruling of the more things you add material, if anything, the more deviations from standard in terms of materials, colors, and any kind of device, just do a doubling, or so you can, or do like double, then triple, then quadruple, something like that. I think would probably be it seems like a good just kind of standard rule. Expert hirelings. If henchmen are defined as the associates, companions, and loyal, to some degree followers of a player character, hirelings are the servitors, mercenaries, and employees of such player characters, and they too can have some degree of loyalty based on their accommodations, rate of remuneration, and treatment. Various hirelings of menial nature are assumed to come with the cost of maintaining a stronghold. Thus, cooks, lackeys, stable boys, sweepers, and various servants are no concern of the player character. Guards and special hirelings are, however, and such persons must be located and enlisted by the PC or his or her NPC henchman. Interesting that once you get a stronghold, you're going to fill it with some basic level of service, and you don't need to worry about that, which is kind of cool. That's something that I think a lot of folks would embrace, right? Okay, you get this thing, and now you can fill it. When we looked at the stronghold roles of, Forbidden Lands, they had kind of a system where you were still tracking that stuff, but it was much sort of simplified. Location of expert hirelings. Most expert hirelings can be found only in towns or cities, although some might be located in smaller communities, providing they are willing to pick up and relocate, of course. Employment is a matter of offer and acceptance, and each player character must do this to do his or her own bargaining. The various types of hirelings listed below will generally be found in the appropriate section of the community, the Street of Smiths, Weapon Way, Armorer's Alley, etc., or at cheap inns in the case of mercenary soldiers. Monthly costs. The cost of each type of expert hireling is shown on the list. This amount is based on all the associated expenditures which go with the position: salary or wage, uniform or clothing, housing, food, and sundry equipment used routinely by the hireling. Exception: the cost does not include arms and armor of soldiers, and these items must be furnished to mercenaries over and above other costs. Certain other hirelings incur costs over and above the normal also when they engage in their occupations. These are indicated on the table by an asterisk. So the expert hirelings, you have folks like alchemists, armorers, blacksmiths, various engineers, jewelers, and then a whole bunch of mercenaries of different types. And then also sages, scribes, ship folk, spies, stewards or castellans, and weapon makers. And then we get some definitions I am not going to read. I feel like we can all figure that you can all go through that, but we do have stuff about how much time it takes to make armor, which is kind of neat, and some asterisks for some different special requirements of different armors. You got your blacksmiths, dwarven smiths, gnomish smiths, who are just better, mercenary soldiers of different types, archers, captains, crossbowmen, etc. Brian Smith says, gives congratulations to Ron, the lackey of the week, for the third time in a row. Did they get a small little painted picture in the, is there like a lackey lounge somewhere where they're off duty, where they can eat their lunch? RBG Grandma mentioned that bulk affects movement rate. Yeah, I know. I didn't read that part, but I know. It's just, is it really worth? It's that kind of just more sort of fiddly things. Is it worth all that for that? Maybe some folks would say yes. I don't know. I tend to think, it's a lot just to say you move a little bit slower. Yeah, it's in the PHB page 101. Thanks, RPG Grandma. So if you're wondering about that, that's where it is. But I don't know that I don't find that compelling enough. I mean, I suppose and I know I've seen all those videos of folks doing like obstacle courses in full plate that seem to suggest that it wasn't quite as bulky as maybe we think it is, or we imagine it is. This is all Sage's Fields of Study and Special Knowledge. That's kind of cool. So there's a whole bunch of stuff on Sages. But thanks for pulling it out. But I would probably, unless you were super want to get in the granular grittiness of wearing different armor, I would just ignore the bulky settings. That would be my piece of advice. I think I'm just going to end it here. Wait, there's more on henchmen. All right, I do want to read these bits before I let you guys go, if that is okay with you. Daily employment. Expert hirelings are generally not available for periods of less than 1 or more months. Soldiers can be hired, but not captains, lieutenants, or sergeants. They recognize hazardous duty, and the cost per day is the same as per month. The supply of such men-at-arms willing to work day to day is strictly limited, so the PCs lose them adventuring. More will not be likely to be found. So be careful with your captains and other folks. Henchmen, whether male or female, are greatly desired by the discerning player, for they usually spell the difference between failure and success in the long-term view. They are useful in individual adventures as a safety measure against the machinations of rival player characters. Provide strength to the character in his or her stronghold, and lastly, serve as a means of adventuring when the player character is unable to. Because they are so useful, and because they are typically so devoted, there are charisma limitations as to how many henchmen a PC is able to attract. Knowing this, the real question for the dungeon master is who will be attracted? Where will they be found? When will they come? And what will the cost be? These questions are answered in detail hereafter. So this seems to be more in the retainer type, right? The folks that are coming to serve you. Level of prospective new henchmen. As a general rule, only characters of first level experience will be attracted to service with a player character. If the NPC has already gained a level or more of experience on his or her own, why would the aegis of a PC be sought? If the player character attempting to find an NPC henchman is over 6th level, there's a 10% chance that the character found will be 2nd level and seeking service because of the renown of the PC. If the player character is over 11th level, there is a 25% chance that the NPC will be 3rd level, 25% chance for 2nd level, and 50% chance for 1st level. And then we have something on the species of the prospective henchman, which I don't really care about, but there's some distribution of said same such. I don't really care about that. Number of prospective henchmen. Human and half-orc characters suitable for level advancement are found at a ratio of 1 in 100. Other races have an incidence of 1 in 50. However, as most of these characters will be lower than the low-level adventurers already in a situation they are satisfied with, and humans more so than other races, unless the development of the area is primarily other than human, 1 in 1,000 population will be interested in offers of employment as henchmen. All right, I'm not sure why we had to break this down along species lines. I would have been happy just to say 1 in 100, just to give you a basic idea of the size of the place and how many henchmen might be around. But, there you go. Brian Smith says, was it common to have henchmen show up in random encounters, like potential henchmen or lackeys popping up in dungeons or whatnot? Not as such, but there was definitely something you could, reaction rolls and whatnot, you could end up with someone wanting to take service. It's like on at least in the white box, I think, and I haven't looked at the AD&D one in forever, but there was on the very positive side of the reaction rolls, they might just say, hey, can I join up with you? So they weren't necessarily a hireling running around as such in the dungeon, but you could run into somebody in the dungeon, and then if you end up on a very positive footing with them, they could potentially join you. You could offer them to join you. They may even ask to join you. But you wouldn't like run into an encounter of a random gang of Link boys, which though that would be cool, just all waving torches and woo. But you might be able to get somebody in a dungeon and say, hey, we don't want to fight you. We want to hire you. And they might go, okay. And then, you hand them a torch. You are the Link boy now, kind of thing. Let's see. Effective location of the hireling or the henchman. Well, there might be as many as 25 or more prospective henchmen in the city of 25,000 cited above. Yeah, why couldn't you say 1 in 1,000? You didn't need all that prelude just to go for that number. And you can, the different costs and effectiveness of different types of basically ad placements. 2 to 8 days for folks to get back to you. Treatment, classes. Okay, I guess I don't really need. We're getting into it gets good nitty gritty, but maybe not super important. It's just it's nice detail, but I don't know if I need to read it all the way through. And we get some loyalty. So here's where we get a whole bunch of loyalty stuff. So remember the last time we got some for the diseases and things, we got these tables where you're starting off with certain percentages, and then you start adding and going through all these tables and going through basically charts of things and decide whether to add, subtract to there. Obviously here we have what are you asking them to do and what failure means. If you ask them to, or I guess you are, if they are ordered to testify against a liege, against, I guess you, or I guess, not sure. No, maybe that's somebody else. Anyway, it's just basically what kind of things they're being asked to do. What does failure mean? Because they're checking their morale, right? So they're being asked to do something. I guess maybe that is you. If you're the employer, they're ordered to testify against you, the employer, by somebody. The local sheriff says, hey, we need you to testify against your employer, John of the Woods. Then that you would, for that hireling, you would have them make a basically morale check, and you're trying to figure all this stuff. If your morale check fails, then they agree to testify. If it succeeds, they don't. So you're getting kind of what happens on a fail, basically. If that makes sense. And then you get all these different, you get these tables of how long have they been with you, kind of their associations, all these things. You get down to that, again, a D100 style percentage roll. And then you figure out, and there's even more, you figure it out. I mean, these are all fun to have, but, and I think, assuming we don't have a VTT that's automated all this stuff, a little bit unwieldy, because it's like you have to go through this whole checklist, right? As opposed to maybe just coming up with a flat number, and then having that number. Like, I think maybe something that would be easier. I mean, which they kind of do have already, but here there's all these modifiers to it, is basically saying a D20 type thing is having a number. 20 would be absolutely loyal, and only on a 5% chance would they flip on you. And then you could raise it down, you just roll against that number kind of thing, and just keep that number, and then maybe not go through all this stuff. Because at the end of the day, again, is it the however long you spend going through all these tables and checking all the numbers and coming up with, okay, it ends up being 68%. Or you could have just had like, it's 15, whatever, you know. Brian Smith says, need a lawyer henchman and a courtroom minigame. It's there. All right, so now, having gone through that, I will not go into time, as time is one of those, I forget where I think the quote is in here about time and the tracking of time that gets bandied about a lot, and I don't want to give it short shrift, but that was fun stuff. I like the henchman stuff. You know, it's interesting to see, to be reminded of what the sort of charts and stuff looked like back in the day to do all this. I do remember back in the day when we were playing our weird mashup of AD&D and BX and stuff. Like I always found these tables I love them because I just found them like they were just so fascinating, just running through these numbers and like all these this table of special considerations. They killed a faithful henchman or hireling in front of a witness. Like all these there's a wonderfully evocative and descriptive, but practically speaking, they're clunky, right? But man, super fun to have. And that's why I love the DMG, because it gives you all this stuff. Do I necessarily want to use all these things as presented in this book? No. But do I constantly find these evocative things I can come back and read over and over again that just fill my mind full of ideas? Yes. And that's kind of why I love this book. All right, folks. Well, I will be back at it. I'm not sure how often I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do. I used to kind of just run through everything. Like this whole book, I'm going to do AD&D, DMG for 8 days or whatever until I'm done. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to spread it out. So it gives me a little bit of a break. Gives folks a bit of a break. And there's no race to this. This thing's only 40 some odd years old. So I think it's okay if we take our time a bit. So I'm not sure if I'm going to come back to this tomorrow or later in the week. I'll probably do at least one more of these this week. I'm not going to just once a week seems to be too slow. Sometime else. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do tomorrow, but I will be back tomorrow. Oh, yes. Thanks, Brian. So as a note, if you're interested in Shadow Dark, go to forums.hex.press and you can read Brian Smith's account, which was awesome, of his game of Shadow Dark, which I feel like, Brian Smith, you can correct me. It seems like it went about as well as, that was like a pure, talk about an OSR style game. You got the whole old school approach from soup to nuts. It ended just probably as it needed to end. It might even have been a little bit disappointing if I'd read it and it had ended otherwise. Really kind of fun stuff. Hopefully you'll do more. I'm curious if your group is going to go back through that starter dungeon again and try to clean it out and get rid of the Minotaur, or what will happen next. I'm definitely curious to read about more people's exploits in the game, but it seemed like everything went according to Hoyle, which is a good sign. All right, folks, if you give a thumbs up on your way out, that would be awesome. If you found yourself in here and not subscribed to the channel and you feel like subscribing, that would also be awesome. Otherwise, game on, everybody, and I will talk to you later. Bye now.